So, dear listeners, our first review on week 52 is News of the World. This takes place 5 years after the end of the Civil War. Captain Jefferson Kyle Kidd, played by Tom Hanks, a veteran of 3 wars, now moves from town to town as a non-fiction storyteller, sharing the news of presidents and queens, glorious feuds, devastating catastrophes, and gripping adventures from the far reaches of the globe. In the plains of Texas, he crosses paths with Joanna, a 10-year-old taken in by the Kiowa people 6 years earlier and raised as one of their own. Joanna, hostile to the world she's never experienced, is being returned to her biological aunt and uncle against her will. Kidd agrees to deliver the child where the law says she belongs, and as they travel hundreds of miles into the unforgiving wilderness, the two will face tremendous challenges of both human and natural forces as they search for a place that either can call home. We have a clip. Let's take a look / listen.
See that bird? Bird.
Bird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Guto.
Guto?
Guto.
Bird is guto?
Guto.
Guto.
Ongo, please.
Buffalo. Since you're so smart. Prickly pear cactus. Pear cactus. And there's juniper out there. And there's some sage.
Seja.
Sage?
Seja.
Sage. Yeah. That's right. It smells good.
Good.
So, what else can you teach me?
So that was a really great clip that Craig has sourced there. It has our 2 main protagonists there, played by Tom Hanks and Helena Zengel. And that's just a really touching clip as we see both of them trying to learn each other's language, culture, get to understand each other. Where will I start with this review? Well, I'll start at the top. It's obviously directed by Paul Greengrass, written by Paul Greengrass and Luke Davies. And the first thing that I noticed about this film, Craig, is it has a lovely soundtrack. It was something that I noticed immediately. And the film starts with Tom Hanks getting dressed. And he has some serious scars on his body. And this is to show that he's a weathered war veteran who now, like you said in your synopsis, travels around reading newspapers. The film is set in 1870. And like I said, it has this beautiful score. The score comes from James Newton Howard, 8-time Oscar nominee and one of my favourite composers. And it really sets the scene. I think the way this film has been shot, it captures the era beautifully. Like I said, it's in 1870. The one thing I would say about this film, and I think I'll bring you in here, Craig, is the pace. It's quite a slow-paced film.
Yeah.
It's not... When this film first came out, one of the original trailers pitched it as more of a traditional Western, whereas actually this is more of a character study and more of a drama. What were your hopes and expectations going into the film, and what was your thoughts on the pace angle?
To be honest with you, I've not really watched any of the really old-time Western movies. More recent, I've watched maybe 3:10 to Yoma, which I absolutely adored watching that. It was exciting. It was like a modern take on what I would expect is a modern take on a Western.
Yeah.
I would expect it to be on par with this in some instances. We have Paul Greengrass, who is obviously the director of some big action movies, the Bourne films, for instance, and he's no stranger to working with Tom Hanks. So from him, you're going to get something that's going to be somewhat action-packed. But you're right, the pace of it is a lot slower and a lot more... it allows you to delve into the characters in a way that you might not have been able to experience from a Western or true Western that really has a pace that goes from 0 to 100, at any moment.
Yeah.
This does have those moments, but they're a lot more subdued and real in some senses.
Yeah.
They are how you expect these things to happen in real life if you were set in the 1870s. But you know, this is an interesting film of sorts, I think, because it's seeing a director that's you know, as far as I'm aware, has never directed a Western before. You know, it sees Tom Hanks, who I'm also pretty sure has never done a Western.
Yeah.
And it brings those two people together and makes something, I think, still rather special. I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on this film as of yet. I want to hear a bit more about what you feel, maybe, and maybe that might swing me around a little bit into feeling like it's a top-notch film. But I don't feel like, personally, this is going to pick up many awards. Now, the Golden Globe nominations, obviously, as you said earlier in the introduction, are out. Anything for News of the World?
Off the top of my head, I didn't know you were going to ask me that. I'm not 100% sure. But what I would say is go back 6 months. I've been following the Oscars race since then. News of the World was one of the favourites, 8-1 joint favourite to win Best Picture. It's now drifted all the way out to 22-1. And I went into this film with very, very high expectations. Like I said, a lot of critics, a lot of pundits have been talking about this as being a Best Picture contender. And I think you're right. There's something not Best Picture about this. And I'll happily say off the bat that this will not win Best Picture. If there are 10 nominees this year, then there's a potential that it could be nominated. In terms of the pace, there is a real injection of pace, Craig, in one particular scene, a shootout scene. No spoilers, we won't say exactly what happens in the scene, but I found that a really tense action sequence. It's pretty much the only action sequence in the film, but the way it's shot, you're literally on the edge of your seat with our two characters in peril. And I thought that was really, really good. But like we've said, not your traditional Western, and a film that was expected to do well in award season, but one that I mean, in some of the tech categories, yes, but in the big categories, I'm not sure. Obviously, it's worth noting that Helena Zengel has been nominated for Best Actress in a Supporting Role in a Motion Picture at the Globes, and she also picked up a Screen Actors Guild Award.
Damn it! I've been searching for that entire time, and you had it there all along, didn't you?
Yeah. And sorry, I had it there all along. It has 2 Golden Globe nominations, one for Helena Zengel and one for James Newton Howard. I did have it in my notes. I apologise.
So even though you didn't expect me to ask you that, you still had it, and you still said you didn't have it. Thanks for that.
I
David.
did have it.
Thank you. You were doing the Golden Globes research. I'm disappointed. Next time, please remember that I might ask you that question.
Yeah, I apologise. So, I mean, that's a good segue into the performances. What did you think of Tom Hanks, and what did you think of Helena Zengel?
Let's start off with the youngest. Helena Zengel, I thought, was amazing. I thought she was absolutely perfect in this film. Brilliantly cast. I thought she carried herself beautifully in this film. She managed to get across a young person that isn't able to communicate effectively with the person that she is with via words, verbally can't communicate. I mean, that clip perfectly summed that up there. They still manage, though, to have this connection. And for a young actress to be able to portray that connection with somebody whilst not really speaking words for a majority of the film really is testament to how good this performance is. And I am not surprised that she's picked up a Best Supporting Actress nomination at the Golden Globes, because I think it is certainly well deserved. Tom Hanks then, moving on to Tom Hanks. Actually, no, what did you think of Helena Zengel?
I think you've taken the words out of my mouth. I think because her character doesn't speak English, a lot depends on her facial expressions, her movements, the way she reacts to certain situations. And I was totally captivated by her performance. I totally believed it, totally engaged with her character. Am I surprised she's picked up a Golden Globe and a Screen Actors Guild nomination? no, in the sense that her performance is definitely worthy of it. In my research for Road to the Oscars, I've got to admit her name wasn't, unless I'm mistaken, popping up that much. And with those 2 awards under her belt, she's got a big chance of an Oscar nomination. Big chance.
Certainly if she wins as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
And
If she
I believe
wins,
she's
then...
one of the youngest as well to ever be nominated. And
Yeah,
if she
I would-
wins, definitely could be. You know,
Yeah.
the only person I can ever think of off the top of my head is Natalie Portman being one of the youngest.
Yeah.
But yeah, amazing stuff. Shall we move on to Tom Hanks's performance then and discuss that a little bit more in depth?
Yeah, so, I mean, Tom Hanks, again, there was talk of a Best Actor nomination. He was in articles and Oscars pundits were excited for this performance. I would say that this is a very solid, worthy Tom Hanks performance. But for me, what Tom Hanks's character doesn't have that, for example, Chadwick Boseman had in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, or Delroy Lindo, who's been snubbed, had in Da 5 Bloods, is that big monologue, that big moment where he can express all of his emotions and get everything out. We don't really get that from Tom Hanks's character.
No,
And that's
we get close to it though, I think.
we get close, but there's no moment in this film where I think that's a Tom Hanks Oscar moment. It wouldn't make it into my, say, top 5 Tom Hanks performances.
Do
but
you
it's,
have a top 5?
off the top of my head, probably no.
You'd have to think about that. Another question.
I will say one of his best performances is in Castaway. And I was going to draw a comparison with Castaway. The relationship that he creates with Wilson is one of the most emotive, fantastic on-screen relationships ever, and it's with a volleyball. So we know Tom Hanks can act when he's got nothing to act with. So when Helena Zengel's character come in and there's that communication problem, it's not a problem for Tom Hanks because he can bounce off a volleyball, let alone a young actress. So
That's very true.
you know,
Very true.
if you can bounce off a volleyball, then if you've got someone as talented as Helena Zengel next to you, you've got no worries at all. I don't think it's, like I said, I don't think it's one of Tom Hanks' best performances, but it's very, very solid, very, very believable, and I would describe it as very, very honest.
Yeah. Oh, you want me coming here, do you?
Well, you could do.
You just suddenly stopped talking?
Sorry.
It's okay. What I was going to say is that, you know, if we were to put together a top 5, he's been in so many movies, it's almost impossible to put them together, I think.
Yeah.
But obviously, Tom Hanks and Paul Greengrass have worked together on Captain Phillips, which was actually the 2013 Best Picture nominee, I believe. And it's that is a very, very, very good performance from Tom Hanks there, and an incredibly tense movie, and one that I rate very, very highly. Now, if we had to compare the two movies, obviously it's like comparing apples to oranges. They're both very different films. But if we were to compare them, which would you say was better?
Captain Phillips.
Is there a reason why you think that, though? What would make that, you know, that moment of realization that is
I just think it's a slightly deeper performance. I think there's a bit more to his character in Captain Phillips. This character in News of the World, it is like an onion. We do learn more about him, but he travels alone. He reads the news alone. He's quite a closed book in many, many ways. And it's when Helena Zengel's character comes in, Joanna, that he begins to open the book and we start to see the words on the pages and learn more about his character.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, I've just realised I've just stopped again.
You've just you've stopped again when it sounds like you're about to carry on. There's more to your point, but don't worry.
I apologise.
Is there any more to that point, though?
No. For me, Captain Phillips would be a superior performance.
Okay. Well, there is a little bit about this film. I mean, let's assess the story a little bit more and pick at that a little bit, because in my opinion, this is a bit of a story that sort of is harking back, or not harking back, but it's actually quite poignant for today's time. It's very relatable in the sense that everybody is at odds with each other in this film, and then everybody seems to be at odds with each other in America right now. With obviously on the back of a civil war in this film, people are still very disconjointed and not happy, and things might go in one way to another, from one way to another, in terms of people still want to revolt. People are still part of the South-North sort of divide that's going on there. It's very similar to what is going on today and happened not so few. Oh, I'm really tongue-tied today. It could be that G&T I've been drinking.
I like how you just admitted that you're on the G&T. It's great.
I had to admit at least that might be why my speech is impeded.
I think it's just to cut the edge off the nerves, Craig.
I'm not nervous. I'm a sheer professional at this.
You were saying?
I was saying, bring it back to the film, Craig. Come on, we're professionals. So a civil war in today's age was on the cards if you looked at it a few weeks ago, before the see, I just can't talk.
Inauguration.
Yes, that is. Thank you for that. Yes, before that. Wow. Anything? Is this resonating with you at all? What I've been trying to say?
Yeah, I think the interesting point you made is there was a video actually on YouTube of when the that building was stormed by the Trump supporters. There was actually a video of someone who was crying, and a reporter said, "Why are you crying?" And she was like, "Because we're in the midst of a revolution." So I know what you mean. Although it wasn't the start of a revolution, there is that tension in America. There is that treading on eggshells. There is that feeling that America was on very, very thin ice before the inauguration of Joe Biden. I think that's a really interesting analysis relating it to this film, where obviously you've got an 1870s America that is still really, really divided. And we see that with the Kiowa people. We see that with the North and the South. We obviously see that we still have scenes where it appears that black people are being used as slaves, or they're certainly being used for labour. So yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting analysis, actually. Yeah, really great point.
Thanks. Anything else that you've got in your notes that you would like to share with myself and the audience? Yeah,
so we've looked at the acting, we've looked a little bit at the plot and the story. I just thought we'd touch upon the cinematography. The cinematography was from Dariusz Wolski, also known for The Martian, Prometheus and Sicario 2, which I thought was a brilliant film and beautifully shot. The cinematography in this film was very, very striking. Obviously, the cinematographer has... Some films you have to use the camera to create a certain feeling. In this film, you have the landscape and you have to capture that. And I think they do that really, really well. We see some gorgeous sunrises and sunsets. We see panoramic high, what I can only assume was drone shots. One particular scene where there's thousands of cattle being moved. We get the traditional Western with Tom Hanks riding on a horse, and that's nicely shot. So I thought the cinematography was really, really nice. And also it was all natural light as well, which you would know more than me, but it's quite tough to capture stuff in natural light. Well,
especially as the sun goes down and you're capturing it from maybe just a fire that's been lit. You're going to need yourself a camera that is actually capable of picking up that low light sensitivity. And they achieve this very well within this movie. It's not like Malcolm and Marie, if we compare that to that, which incidentally, guys, is out today on Netflix. A little plug there. If you want to listen to our review, go over to YouTube or download Week 51. Anyway, so the low light sensitivity coming from the camera. Now, it's interesting to note that, they've got to try and capture, as you say, the wide landscapes, and they've got to sort of also capture the intimacy of these characters on screen, and it's a difficult thing to achieve, to make balance to both of them. And we've seen it in films before where we have a story, it's in cities, and they throw in these landscape shots, I mean, of the cityscape over drones, and they throw them in to the point where it's just oversaturated cutaway scenes to
Yeah.
bridge the gap between scenes. You don't get that here. They're used purposefully within this film, and it's done so in a really brilliant way, and it brings something that maybe was unconventional in the time of when shooting westerns, which was using handheld cameras over the last God knows how many years when westerns have been about, to making it feel something that's a very more modern, but harks back to the way that they traditionally shot these films. There's still more handheld things going on in here, and I think it gives it that sort of tactile feel, that and it does bring an intimacy with that, whilst you have those drone shots showing the wide landscape. So
Yeah.
I think the cinematography in this film is gorgeous. It's stunning, and it's typical of, you know, a Greengrass film, you know, in that sense, because he is known for shooting films that look great, and he has brought a lot of cinematographers on board to make that happen. You noted what films our cinematographer here has done, and I believe he's also done the first chapters of Pirates of the Caribbean as well. So he knows how to frame something on a wide open landscape that maybe has a lot of texture going on, and it knows how to bring that texture out of the landscape while still creating an intimate story. And yeah, this is a great pick from Greengrass, bringing the cinematographer in to highlight the cinematography of the landscape. Sorry, I've waffled on a bit there.
No, spot on. And then finally, we've touched a lot of bases. Just the screenplay. Obviously, this was based on the novel of the same name by Paulette Giles. I thought the screenplay was really, really good. Again, a very slow burn, but some real intense moments in there as well. I love those scenes where Tom Hanks is reading the news, because we've got to remember, Craig, this was a time where obviously there was no internet. I mean, that may sound silly me saying that, but you know, people would get their news from a newspaper. And certain towns and settlements wouldn't even have newspapers. So it was up for people like Tom Hanks to travel.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But also that some of these people didn't even know how to read. So it was up to somebody like Tom Hanks to deliver the news in a like a ITV News broadcast sort of way, but live in a farmhouse. I don't know. But, it's a testament to the story in that sense. But it's probably a good point to bring in a little bit about the music, because the music follows that storyline so beautifully well, you know, from this regret all the way through to almost redeeming nature in the soundtrack. And it, you know, there's only one person that I know that you love more in the music for films, and that's James Newton Howard, and he does the score here. And I mean, he is the one that you love more, isn't it? Or is there somebody else?
James Newton Howard is probably my favourite. Obviously, Hans Zimmer's going to be up there as well.
Thank God I got it right.
But James Newton Howard is fantastic. Whether you like the film or not, his score for the film The Village, a very controversial film, panned by some people, considered a very good film by others.
What do you think?
I loved The Village. I thought
right.
it was really clever. I loved the characters. I loved the twist. And the soundtrack on The Village is brilliant. The soundtrack which he does for Signs, the Alien movie, is really, really intense. He's an 8-time Oscar nominee, and a good soundtrack is a soundtrack that you listen to and you go, I can imagine the film being this. And if you listen to this soundtrack on its own, you would go, yeah, that's for a Western. It's a brilliant score, and it works really well with the screenplay. The screenplay and the score bounce off of each other. The performances are great. I'm a big fan of this film, but it's not as good as I was hoping. And I think that's because it really was bigged up a lot pre-award season.
I was going to say a little bit more about the music, but I feel you're taking us to the end of the review.
I was sort of trying to round it off, but I want to hear your thoughts, and so do the listeners, Craig.
Okay, well, I was just going to say that I felt that the motifs that James Newton Howard created for these characters in the film for the elements of music, whilst they were also, you can tell that they have their own motifs of music. They're so subtle that you forget that they are motifs in a way. Like when you see Tom Hanks come on the screen, he might have a little bit of a musical motif. Now, a great example of really obvious motifs in films is in The Holiday, where our character is genuinely making music to portray the person's character.
Yeah.
But that's one typical scene in a film where they're trying to highlight that films and music do that. And if you're taking and analysing that and putting that into films and to review them like we're listening for these things constantly. And you hear that they have motifs in this film, but he's such a master of being able to make it a subtle thing that you don't think, oh, it's Tom Hanks on screen now because that motif, that piece of music's on screen. Like you know, like there's so much more depth and layers to the orchestral arrangement of the music, and yeah, I really loved the music for this film, and I wouldn't be surprised if it picked up some awards for it. I really did. I really think it will.
I would suspect that it would be nominated for Best Original Score at the Oscars. Obviously, it's picked up that Golden Globe nomination, and rightly so. And another thing, lastly, the production design, the costumes, I think are great. Good westerns have good costumes, and Tom Hanks just looks great. He fits this character. He plays this character so well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think if you're ready, I'm ready.
Are you ready for questions? Is that what
unless,
you're trying to say?
Unless you have any more points.
I really don't actually.
Good. So I'm going to ask you the question first. Craig, News of the World. Is it worth it?
Yes, this is definitely worth watching. This is a Universal and Netflix movie, and it's available to stream on Netflix on February the 10th, 2021. So in 5 days' time, this is out on February the 5th. So in 5 days' time, you might be listening to this either before or after that date, but it is available on February the 10th. And 100% worth watching on Netflix if you can get to a cinema. Some of our listeners are able to get to cinemas. Do see this on the biggest screen possible. I think those, as we said, those landscapes will really pop, and the intimate story will really glow on screen from those low light fire scenes. David, News of the World, is it worth it?
Yes, 100% worth it. One little warning, don't go in expecting sort of a fast-paced shootout and Mexican standoff western. It's more of a slow-paced character drama. But like we've said, the score by James Newton Howard is brilliant. The cinematography is gorgeous. The two performances are great. And it's a film that I've seen once, and it's a film that I will definitely watch again. News of the World. Worth it.